She probably just copied it off the internet. No way a temp like that wrote this. That's what her team lead said, in the middle of a meeting, while passing around her report. And the room laughed. Not awkward chuckles, full-on, unfiltered laughter. No one corrected him. No one looked at her. She sat in the corner like part of the office furniture. The only black woman in the room, the only one without a nameplate, the only one not invited to speak. They handed her the empty coffee pot, told her to be a team player, and called her Danielle, Deja, Destiny. Everything but her name. She said nothing. Not then. 3 days after they fired her for not fitting in, their inboxes lit up with a lawsuit from the top civil rights firm in the state, co-signed by a partner whose name they did remember. Only this time, it was on legal letterhead. You think you've heard this story before? You haven't. This isn't just about a workplace slip-up. This is about humiliation in plain sight. About being brilliant and black and still invisible. About a woman they pushed out, who walked back and holding the power to dismantle everything they built. If this made your jaw tighten, hit like and subscribe, because what happens next is only getting louder. What moment hit you hardest? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We're reading. The rain had just stopped when Denise Howard stepped out of the cab, her dark trench coat catching a gust of wind as she adjusted the strap of her leather satchel. She glanced up at the towering glass building that shimmered under the overcast sky. Hamilton Rowan Cole, a rising name in commercial consulting with a reputation for modern workplace culture and inclusive innovation. Denise had read those words over and over again on their website. Now, standing at the edge of the marble lobby, she was ready to find out what they really meant. It was 8:02 a.m., 2 minutes after the building officially opened, and Denise was on time, dressed professionally in a navy blue blouse, black slacks, and low heels. Nothing flashy, everything clean, pressed, and presentable. She smiled politely at the front desk associate, a young man with a headset and coffee cup in hand, who glanced up from a screen. "Temp for marketing?" he asked. Denise nodded. "Yes, Denise Howard." He gave a short nod and tapped a few keys. "Okay, they didn't assign a workstation yet. Just head to the 3rd floor. Ask for Clara, she'll sort you out." Denise thanked him and made her way to the elevator, pressing the chrome button with the same quiet determination she had carried through every job, every degree, every room where she wasn't expected to lead. The 3rd floor opened into a modern workspace, sleek desks arranged in an open floor plan, all glass and brushed steel and dangling Edison bulbs. She stepped in and was immediately greeted by the subtle side eyes of 3 team members huddled near the coffee station. No one said hello. She spotted a woman walking briskly toward her, short blonde bob, tailored suit, clipboard in hand. "Denise." "Yes, I'm Clara," she said, glancing at her watch. "You're the new temp, right?" "That's right." Clara gestured down the hallway, without looking up again. "Okay, we don't have a desk for you yet. You can set up in the print room for now. Should be a chair in there." Denise blinked once. "The print room." "Yeah," Clara said, already turning to walk away. "We're short on space." Denise walked down the hall past rows of white desks, with dual monitors and personalized nameplates. She passed a wall of glass offices, some with framed certificates, others with stocked bookshelves and cushioned chairs. Then she reached a narrow door labeled Print Supplies, pushed it open, and stepped into a room that smelled faintly of toner and warm plastic. A single chair had been wedged between a file cabinet and a table with stacked boxes of printer paper. She set her bag down slowly. There was no window, no power strip, just a plug in the wall and the hum of the industrial printer beside her. She took a breath and powered on her laptop. By 9 a.m., she had already reviewed the week's brand brief, analyzed performance reports, and created a new Excel doc to streamline the project timeline. Tasks she'd completed 100 times before in quieter, more polite rooms. At 9:15, the door creaked open and a man poked his head in, chewing gum and holding a mug. "You Deja?" Denise looked up. "It's Denise." "Oh, right." He ducked out without correcting himself. At 10:30, someone else popped in. "Danielle." "Denise," she said again. The woman smiled faintly. Cool. She left. It happened 4 times by lunch. Deja, Danielle, Donna, the new girl. Not one person got her name right. By noon, Clara returned and handed her a lanyard. Your temp badge, she said, not waiting for a thank you. Denise clipped it on and opened her lunch, eating quietly between the hums of the printer warming up and the buzz of hallway chatter outside. Through the open crack in the door, she watched team members laugh at a joke someone told too loudly. The woman named Ashley leaned over a desk showing someone a TikTok. A man in rolled sleeves sipped cold brew from a mason jar, tapping away on his mechanical keyboard. No one looked toward the print room. At 1 p.m., Clara reappeared with a stack of client backgrounders. Please input these into the master doc by end of day, she said. Send to Mark when you're done. Denise took the papers and nodded. Of course. Clara turned without a word and walked off. By 3:30, Denise had reorganized the client deck, formatted the brand guide with new fonts, and color-coded every priority into a new Gantt chart. No one came in to check her progress. No one asked if she needed login credentials, or even showed her the Wi-Fi password. She used her mobile hotspot instead. At 4 p.m., the printer jammed. Denise cleared it manually. At 4:15, someone from finance stopped by to use the copier and said, "You the intern?" Denise replied calmly, "I'm the marketing temp." "Oh, nice," he said, distracted, already scrolling his phone. By 5 p.m., Denise had sent the finished report to Mark with every requested update and improvement. At 5:05, she shut her laptop and gathered her things. As she left the print room, the hallway was still buzzing. No one noticed her pass by. Outside, the air had cooled. The sidewalks shimmered slightly from the afternoon drizzle. She walked down the steps without pausing, her bag hanging steady at her side. The next morning began the same way the first had ended, quietly. Denise arrived at 7:56 a.m., the second person on the floor, her bag slung neatly across her shoulder, her face calm and unreadable. She passed the still empty desks, the untouched coffee carafes, and made her way down the now familiar hallway to the print room, where her temporary workstation awaited with the same dusty chair, the same hum of the copier, and the same faint scent of heated plastic. She plugged in her laptop and began sorting through the latest marketing metrics she'd pulled the night before, organizing them for the department's upcoming mid-quarter presentation. Around 8:47, people started arriving. Someone laughed down the hall. The clatter of heels and coffee cups grew louder. A playlist started softly playing from someone's desktop speaker, upbeat indie rock, something about sunshine and caffeine. By 9:10, the door swung open and a junior analyst named Brooke poked her head in. "Hey, Denise, right? Can you help me reformat this chart? Clara said you were good with Excel." Denise stood and followed her to the main bullpen. It was the first time she'd been invited out of the print room all morning. She hovered behind Brooke's desk, helping fix formulas and align graph labels. A few people glanced over. No one spoke to her directly. When the chart was fixed, Brooke smiled. "Thanks. Oh, you should come join us in the lounge. We're doing cake in, like 10. Denise blinked. "Cake? Yeah, it's birthday week," Brooke said. "We do this thing every month. Office tradition." Denise nodded once. "Okay." At 10:30, the whole department gathered in the lounge area, which had been decorated with cheap streamers and a few balloons taped to the whiteboard. A large chocolate cake sat in the center of the communal table, surrounded by paper plates and plastic forks. Clara stood with a plastic knife and announced, "All right, everyone, quick break for our birthday girl." There was clapping, a few cheers. Then she turned and pointed to the cake. It was decorated in neat pink frosting that read, "Happy Birthday, Debbie." A few people laughed and looked around. "Wait, who's Debbie?" someone said. "Is that, like, the old temp from last year?" another asked. Clara shrugged, slightly confused, but still smiling. "I think it was in the calendar. Anyway, whoever she is, she gets a cake." There was more laughter. Denise stood to the side of the room, arms folded, saying nothing. No one looked her way. No one asked her if her birthday was this week, though it was. When slices were passed around, Denise took one. She returned to her corner and ate it slowly, chocolate and vanilla cream. She didn't say a word. At 11:04, she returned to the print room. There was no candle, no card, no mention. At 12:45 p.m., she submitted a revised brand positioning report, flagged for errors she had fixed from a previous version submitted by a full-time associate. At 1:10 p.m., Clara replied, "Thanks. Nothing else." By 2:20 p.m., Denise prepared the financial summary file requested by Mark for the Friday investor brief. She double-checked the figures, cross-referenced last quarter's variance, and queued the attachments to send. At 2:31 p.m., she hit send on the email addressed to mark.wilton@herconsulting.com. The file was 3.2 megabytes. The Wi-Fi was stable. There was no error message. At 2:42 p.m., her inbox locked. The screen froze, the browser reloaded, and the login field popped back into view. She entered her credentials. Access denied. She tried again. Same result. Her documents disappeared. The folders flickered. Then blank. Denise walked calmly down the hall to the IT support desk on the second floor. The technician, a young man in a graphic tee under a corporate lanyard, looked up when she explained the situation. He checked his screen. "Weird. Looks like your account got flagged for internal quarantine." "What does that mean?" she asked. "Sometimes happens with temps," he said. "System doesn't recognize the credentials as stable users, so the firewall assumes it's a dormant threat. Nothing personal. Should be fixable." "How long will that take?" "No idea. Could be an hour. Could be till tomorrow. Depends how quick the ticket escalates." Denise stood still. Her posture didn't shift. Her hands didn't move. "I need to submit financial updates before close of business." The tech shrugged. "I can't promise anything. If you had access to a personal drive or offline copy, that might help." She thanked him and left. At 3:08 p.m., she used her phone's hotspot to log in with a guest account and began recreating the report from scratch. At 3:41, she discovered the master folder she needed, containing updated Q2 projections, was blocked from guest-level access. She flagged it. No one responded. At 4 p.m., Clara messaged, "Hey, Mark said he hasn't gotten your report. You send that yet?" Denise replied, "Working on a new version. My account was locked out after I sent the first." A minute later, Clara replied, "IT says that's a temp system error. Should have been resolved earlier." Denise responded, "It hasn't." Clara didn't write back. At 4:15, Denise requested view-only access from a senior analyst named Greg. He didn't reply. At 4:40, she found an older version of the forecast in her downloads folder. It was outdated but usable. She rebuilt the report in less than 15 minutes. At 5:03 p.m., she sent the final version from her guest login. It lacked the final numbers Mark had asked for. She noted that in the body of the email. At 5:06, she shut her laptop. No one asked her about the cake. No one followed up on the error. The building lights dimmed as she passed the glass doors, her ID badge clicking softly against her lanyard. In the lobby, a group of employees took selfies next to the company's new diversity poster. "We celebrate every voice." Denise didn't stop to look at it. She walked through the revolving doors into the chilled evening air, the weight of her bag even on both shoulders. Her name still unspoken by anyone who had sliced the cake. The next day, she arrived. The next morning, Denise arrived earlier than usual. She walked into the building at 7:32 a.m., the city still stretching into motion around her, the lobby echoing slightly with her steps. She went straight to the third floor, used her badge on the reader, still active, and settled into the print room once again. The chair hadn't moved. The walls were still bare. The air smelled like warm plastic and dust, the same as every day prior. She opened her laptop and logged in using the temporary guest credentials she'd been assigned the day before. Her system login still hadn't been restored. The IT desk had not followed up. She checked the shared calendar to find a meeting titled Q2 Strategic Alignment Leadership only scheduled for 10 a.m. in the executive boardroom. Beneath the event, under attendees, she saw a list of names: Clara, Greg, Mark, several senior consultants, and Brady S., a first-year intern in the analytics team. Her name wasn't there. Denise's expression didn't shift. She scrolled through her files, opened the Excel workbook she had prepared, and reviewed the figures one more time. The data she compiled from the previous month's social performance audit, brand engagement funnel, and partner ROI was laid out clearly. The charts had been reformatted 3 times. The footnotes were sourced and hyperlinked. The slide deck she had created for the strategy team had been uploaded into the shared drive under the folder. Mid Q2/marketing projection assets, final for strategy deck. At 8:56 a.m., she received an email from Clara. Quick heads up, please don't schedule anything between 10 and 11:30. Exec boardroom is booked for Q2 planning. We'll need access to your doc before then. Can you make sure your guest login still gives us edit access? Denise responded, yes. All documents are updated and accessible under the strategy deck folder. Clara replied, perfect, thanks. At 9:38, Brady passed by the print room door, sipping an energy drink and adjusting his badge lanyard. Morning, Danielle, he said casually. It's Denise, she corrected. Right. Sorry, he said, already halfway down the hall. At 9:55, she watched from the glass slit in the hallway as people filed into the boardroom. Mark walked in with a printed copy of her slide deck in hand. Clara followed behind him, holding a notepad. Greg was checking his watch. Someone brought in a tray of coffee and branded folders. Brady walked in last, fumbling with his iPad. The boardroom door clicked shut. The blinds lowered electronically. The hallway emptied. Denise turned back to her screen and opened a blank document. She began drafting the weekly trend summary, even though no one had asked for it. At 11:12, the boardroom door opened again. People filed out, chatting quietly. Clara paused to give someone a congratulatory pat on the shoulder. Denise stepped into the hallway. Brady passed her, holding a gift bag and grinning. Big morning, he said. They gave me a nickname. Be smart. He laughed and disappeared into the lounge. 10 minutes later, a company-wide message went out. Please join us in congratulating Brady Simmons on being named this quarter's Emerging Talent Spotlight. Brady has shown exceptional promise in leadership, analysis, and innovation. We're excited to watch his journey. There was a GIF attached of balloons and confetti. Denise sat still. Her inbox pinged again. A second message from HR read, Brady's recognition celebration will take place today at 3 p.m. in the main lounge. Stop by for cake and team photos. Denise closed the email. She opened her shared drive and searched for the file titled Analytics Training Materials Prepared for Intern Onboarding. Her name appeared in the metadata. The document had been viewed 5 times this week. Brady was listed as a viewer. At 1:47 p.m., Clara messaged, Hey, can you pull together the engagement metrics from April for Mark? He wants to cross-reference with Brady's insights. Denise replied, They're already included in the Q2 deck submitted Tuesday. Clara responded, Oh, he thought that was Brady's section. I'll let him know. Can you still resend them separately just in case? Denise sent them again without comment. At 3:02, from her desk in the print room, Denise heard applause and laughter coming from a lounge. Voices echoed off the walls. Someone whistled. Camera shutters clicked. Someone shouted, speech, followed by more cheering. Through the narrow crack in the hallway door, she saw Brady standing in front of the crowd, holding a slice of cake and smiling as someone took a photo with a branded backdrop. At 3:17, she opened a new Excel file. At 3:40, she updated the weekly influencer pipeline sheet. At 3:56, she formatted a client call recap no one had assigned her. At 4:12, she received a notification that her Temp login was set to expire in 72 hours. At 4:38, Clara sent another message. Don't forget to update the PPC metrics. Mark wants a cleaned-up version for the upcoming brand partner sync. Let's make sure it aligns with Brady's forecasting doc. Denise opened the file. It was a modified copy of her original deck. The title page now read, Q2 Forecast Projections Prepared by B. Simmons. She made no edits. She closed the document. At 5 p.m., The lounge lights were still on. Balloons clung to the corners of the ceiling. The printer jammed as she prepared to log off. She cleared it without calling IT. She closed her laptop, unplugged her charger, and walked toward the elevator. On her way out, she passed a poster that read, "This month's core value, collaboration." Someone had scrawled "Be smart" on the edge of it in red marker. She stepped out into the evening air as the sky turned violet and the buildings shimmered in the reflection of a glass tower behind her. The revolving doors spun once, then stilled. She didn't stop walking. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and opened her calendar. She scrolled past the Q2 meeting invite and looked down at the system message, still open from IT. The 72-hour countdown had already ticked down to. By the time Denise returned to the office the next morning, her badge still worked, but the receptionist didn't greet her this time. The moment she reached the third floor, she saw her name displayed in bold red font on the monitor mounted outside the elevator. "Denise Howard, please report to HR before logging in." The message was short, impersonal, without context, and blinking steadily. She paused, took a measured breath, then turned back toward the hallway and made her way toward the glass-walled HR suite. When she arrived, the receptionist barely looked up. "You're here for the 9:15? Denise nodded. "Take a seat, they'll call you in." At exactly 9:15, the door opened, and a woman in a gray blazer with thick-rimmed glasses appeared. "Denise? I'm Holly. Come on in." Denise followed her into a clean, white conference room with no windows and 2 chairs at a small table. A printed manila folder sat open between them. Holly gestured for her to sit and closed the door behind them. "So," Holly began, her voice neutral, flipping open the folder, "there's been a discrepancy in the budget allocation figures from last month's marketing spend." Denise remained still, eyes focused. Holly continued, "Your name was listed as a support reviewer on the original draft of the Q1B cost projection report. We've been asked to follow up." Denise replied calmly, "I did not generate the projection. I was asked to format and upload the final file. The numbers were submitted by Greg." Holly didn't blink. "Greg has indicated that you may have made edits to the formatting after submission." Denise reached into her bag, pulled out a printed email thread, and placed it on the table. "Greg requested I adjust margins and font size on March 14th. No numerical edits were made." Holly took the pages, skimmed them, and placed them inside the folder without comment. There was a pause. Then Holly said, "We're not assigning blame. We're just checking the pipeline for accountability." Denise didn't respond. Holly flipped to another page. "We've also received some informal feedback from your department." Denise's gaze didn't shift. Holly continued, "There have been notes about your demeanor. Some colleagues have reported that your tone in emails is overly formal and that you appear disengaged in group settings." Denise tilted her head slightly. "I was not aware of any complaints." Holly nodded. "We understand that, as a temp, adjusting to culture can be challenging. That's why we're strongly recommending, that you attend a workshop next Tuesday. It's called Communicating with Colleagues, Building Better Internal Bridges." Denise raised an eyebrow. "Is this a required session?" Holly gave a practiced smile. "Highly encouraged. Attendance will be noted in your file." Denise said nothing. Holly slid a document across the table. The header read, "Internal Conduct Development Series Enrollment Confirmation." Beneath it, her name was already typed in. "You can just sign here," Holly said, tapping the bottom right corner with her pen. Denise scanned the form, then signed it with one clean stroke. Holly took it back, filed away, and said, "Thanks for your cooperation." Denise left the HR office without speaking. At 10:04, she returned to the print room. A new stack of briefs sat on the table. No note, no sender. She picked them up and opened the first file. Inside, the budget numbers were correct. Greg's initials marked the data columns. Her own noted in small font at the bottom under. Formatting DH. At 11:12, she received an internal message from IT. "Your full credentials have been restored. Please log out and back in." She did as instructed. Her access returned, but several folders were now locked to read-only. She flagged the issue. No one responded. At 12:22, Clara knocked lightly on the print room door. "Hey," she said, peeking in. "Just a heads up. We need the final recap deck from last week's brand call. You still have the notes, right?" Denise nodded. "Yes. I'll send them before 1. Clara hesitated, then added, "Also, FYI, the workshop HR signed you up for, it's helpful. I did it my first month. They teach you how to word emails better, like friendlier. You know." Denise replied, "Thank you." Clara smiled quickly and left. At 1:06, Denise sent the deck to the strategy team with every action item clearly documented, organized by urgency, ownership, and estimated impact. At 1:47, she received a reply from Greg. "Thanks. Can you try bulleting these instead of numbering? Makes it easier to digest." Denise opened the deck, reformatted the list, and resent it by 2:05. No reply followed. At 2:42, Brady walked by and poked his head into the room. "Yo, just heard you're doing the communication thing. Don't worry, it's not that bad. I zoned out halfway through, but they give you free granola bars." Denise looked up briefly. "Thanks." Brady chuckled and walked off. At 3 o'clock, Denise received an Outlook calendar invitation for Internal Relations Workshop Tuesday, 10 a.m. The location was listed as Training Room B. Below it, the note read, "Assigned by HR. Attendance will be confirmed." At 3:33, while compiling outreach metrics, she noticed that a project file she had built over the last 2 weeks now showed last edited by B. Simmons. She opened the revision log. Brady had copied her table layout and pasted it into a new version under his own name. She stared at the screen. She closed the tab. At 4:11, she received an email from Mark. "Please prioritize the email campaign wrap-up tomorrow. Use Brady's doc as your base. His tone is more brand-aligned." No attachments were included. At 4:48, Denise prepared a clean summary of the campaign data, using her own metrics. She did not use Brady's file. At 5:01, she shut her laptop, placed it back into her bag, and stood. As she reached for the light switch, a message popped up on her screen. "Reminder you are enrolled in Internal Conduct Development Series, Communicating with Colleagues." She clicked the X in the corner. Outside, the wind had picked up. She pulled her coat tighter, stepped into the street, and kept walking past the cafe where the others sometimes gathered. The lights inside flickered warm against the glass. Laughter carried faintly through the windows. She didn't stop. She walked 2 more blocks, rounded the corner, and reached. On Friday morning, the message came at 8:03 a.m. Denise had just finished reviewing the performance dashboard from the week's campaign rollout when her Outlook pinged with a calendar invitation marked Urgent HR, Review 9 a.m. Subject line in bold. No body text, no attachments. The invite came directly from Holly, with Mark and Clara CC'd. Denise sat at her desk in the print room, eyes resting on the blinking cursor in her reply window, and for a brief second, the silence around her grew denser. She clicked accept and closed her laptop. At 8:47, she smoothed the front of her blazer, slung her bag across her shoulder, and walked steadily toward the glass-paneled HR suite where she had sat just days earlier. The hallway was empty except for the muffled sound of voices laughing in the marketing lounge, probably finishing leftover cupcakes from Brady's Spotlight win. She entered the waiting area. The receptionist didn't speak, only nodded and gestured to a closed door labeled Director, People and Culture. At 9:01 on the dot, it opened and Holly stepped out. "Denise, come on in," she said with a clipped tone and that same practiced smile. Inside, the lighting was soft, artificial daylight glow. A framed poster on the wall behind the desk read, "Excellence starts with culture." Next to it, a shelf filled with books titled things like Empathy-Driven Management and Workplace Belonging lined up with surgical precision. Denise sat in the offered chair without a word. Across from her sat Holly and a second woman, lean, sharp-boned, wearing an expensive blouse and a silver watch, who introduced herself as Miranda Graves, Director of HR Compliance. Miranda held a folder already opened. "Thank you for coming in on short notice, Denise," she began, her tone polite but completely flat. We've been reviewing feedback over the past few weeks regarding your engagement and fit within the Hamilton, Rowe, and Cole culture. She flipped a page. As a contracted temporary staff member, your placement here includes an at-will clause, allowing either party to terminate the engagement at any time. Denise nodded once. She said nothing. Miranda continued, there have been concerns raised about your participation style, your approach to team collaboration, and overall integration with departmental dynamics. Holly jumped in then, shifting in her chair. To be clear, this isn't about performance. You've been competent in your tasks. She folded her hands over her notebook. But fit is equally important here, and unfortunately, we've reached a point where alignment is no longer sustainable. Denise kept her face still. Miranda added, your final day will be today. We'll issue a severance payment reflecting the agreed terms in your contract. You'll retain access to your inbox until 12 p.m. After that, IT will deactivate your credentials. Denise's hands rested on her lap. She gave a small nod. Understood. Miranda pulled out a printed form. This is your exit document. Signing acknowledges receipt, not agreement with the decision. Denise took the pen, signed her name, and passed it back. Holly stood and extended her hand. Denise shook it once, briefly. No other words were exchanged. She exited the room calmly, walked down the hallway past 3 open-plan workstations, and returned to the print room. Her laptop sat on the desk where she left it. She opened it, reviewed her inbox, cleared her desktop folder, and sent herself copies of 3 innocuous files she had built from scratch. A branded slide template, an updated metrics dashboard, and a spreadsheet she'd created to fix someone else's forecasting error. None of them confidential, all of them her own design. At 11:32 a.m., she walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, then walked slowly down the executive corridor where the offices sat untouched, quiet, and polished. At the far end of the hall, past the VP suites, was Mark Wilton's office. The lights were off. His blinds were drawn. She knocked once out of courtesy, then entered. His desk was cluttered with marketing journals, a half-drunk latte, and a to-do list written in Sharpie on a legal pad. On the center of his desk, Denise placed a white envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper folded once, with the words handwritten in black ink, "Thanks for everything." She turned, stepped out of his office, and closed the door behind her. Back at her desk, she unplugged her charger, wrapped the cable neatly, and slid it into her bag. She stood, looked around the print room one last time. The dented chair, the faint hum of the printer, the box of unused pens someone had left open the day she arrived. Her badge was clipped to her shirt. She unhooked it and laid it gently on the desk. At 11:56, she took the elevator down to the lobby. The glass walls caught the light of a late morning sun, bouncing off a tile. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. The receptionist was on a personal call, laughing softly as Denise passed. Outside, the city moved as if unaware. Cars buzzed past in steady waves. Across the street, 2 delivery drivers unloaded boxes of bottled water. A bus pulled up, paused, then moved on. Denise walked 2 blocks in silence, turned left into a quiet side street lined with trees just starting to bud. She stopped at a bench, sat down, took out her phone, opened the Contacts app, scrolled to one entry marked with a star and a 3-letter abbreviation. She tapped it, let it ring once, then twice. When the call connected, she said, "It's done. Let's proceed." She ended the call, stood, walked back toward the main avenue. The sound of traffic returned. She checked her watch, adjusted her coat, crossed the street toward. 3 days after Denise exited the revolving doors of Hamilton, Rowe and Cole, the first email arrived at precisely 9:06 a.m. It was marked as legal correspondence urgent response required, and came from the central inbox of Miles and Howard LLP, one of the most respected litigation firms on the East Coast. The email was addressed to the General Counsel, CC'd to the CEO, HR Director, Chief Operating Officer, and several internal legal aides. The subject line read simply, Howard versus Hamilton, Rowe and Cole initial notice of legal action. The receptionist flagged it immediately and forwarded it up the chain. Within 10 minutes, every member of the executive board was aware of its existence. By 9:30, a closed-door meeting was in motion. The office atmosphere shifted. Conversations hushed. Slack messages turned terse. Coffee breaks were skipped. The email contained a 5-page legal letter in PDF format, accompanied by 2 separate download links, one leading to an encrypted archive of evidentiary material, the other to a 47-page supporting memorandum outlining claims, timelines, and names. The document was signed by co-founding partner Jeremiah Miles and lead counsel Denise Howard, ESQ, the same Denise who, 3 days earlier, had been escorted off the premises without fanfare. The demand listed within the filing was $85 million, citing unlawful termination, racial discrimination, hostile work environment, and negligent supervision. The language was clean, direct, and unmistakably aggressive. It stated that the firm possessed irrefutable evidence of systemic bias, internal negligence, and coordinated suppression of a contracted employee's contributions based solely on race and perceived status. At 10:12 a.m., the legal team at Hamilton, Rowe and Cole, downloaded the evidentiary folder. Inside were audio files labeled by date, captured during team huddles, recorded from open conference room discussions where Denise had been referenced repeatedly, sometimes by name, other times as the temp, that girl in the print room, and in one case, simply her. In one clip, a marketing manager could be heard saying, "She's efficient, sure, but you know it's just different. She doesn't really blend." Another clip included laughter after a comment from Greg. "I mean, we all know who's going to get credit anyway. Let's not pretend the intern isn't more presentable." Accompanying the audio were screenshots of internal Slack messages. One read, "Mark wants her gone before Q3, figure it out." Another, "We need someone who gets the culture, not just the numbers." Several messages came from private threads between Clara and Greg, including jokes about Denise's reserved demeanor and a gif of a woman being pushed out of a meeting room. The archive also included 10 time-stamped surveillance videos from building security. One showed Denise seated alone in the print room while the rest of the team gathered in the lounge for a celebration. Another showed Brady entering the print room, lifting files from Denise's desk, then exiting without acknowledgement. One video captured a brief conversation between Clara and Holly near the HR office. The transcript provided in the legal memo included the line, "She's not a good fit. If we don't cut her now, she's going to ask for more." Attached to the document was a section detailing repeated instances where Denise had been credited for work but omitted from presentations, recognition, or project leadership. The list matched internal project IDs and version histories pulled from the company's SharePoint logs. By noon, the company's general counsel requested an emergency meeting with the executive leadership. The agenda was marked, Denise Howard filing internal risk exposure. Inside the boardroom, voices were clipped. Miranda sat stiffly, flipping through printouts. Mark refused to make eye contact with anyone. Clara asked to excuse herself twice to take calls. No one smiled. At 1:30 p.m., a second email was issued from Miles and Howard LLP, this one addressed directly to the CEO, labeled Notice of Intent to Escalate National Media Inquiry Pending. The message indicated that several journalists had been briefed and were preparing to publish pieces regarding the treatment of temporary employees at Hamilton, Rowe and Cole, citing the firm's hypocrisy between its public DEI pledges and its internal handling of minority staff. By 2 p.m., someone in communications suggested a company-wide hold on all external posts. Scheduled social media was paused. The homepage banner on their website, originally promoting Workplace Equity Week, was taken down. At 2:17 p.m., IT was instructed to begin an internal audit on all system accesses tied to Denise's profile. They confirmed that no data had been exfiltrated. The logs showed routine usage, precise formatting, and no anomalies. The audit only reinforced the detail in the legal documents. Denise had not only done her job, she had exceeded expectations in documentation, delivery, and discipline. At 3:42 p.m., Holly attempted to call Denise's number from her office landline. The call rang twice, then diverted to voicemail. She left no message. At 4:05 p.m., The Miles and Howard litigation page was updated to feature Denise Howard as lead counsel in an active corporate civil rights case. Her profile listed her previous work in corporate ethics consulting, internal investigations, and enterprise DEI compliance. It did not mention Hamilton, Rowe, and Cole directly, but the timeline was clear. Her listed law degrees were accurate. Her certifications, her awards, her publications, all verified. At 4:33 p.m., Greg sent a private message to Mark. "Did you know she was a lawyer?" Mark replied, "No." "Did Clara?" No response. At 5 p.m., the executive team reconvened with legal advisors present. They reviewed the list of employees mentioned in the complaint. They highlighted every phrase in the audio recordings flagged as high risk. They constructed timelines. They began drafting responses. HR compliance opened a confidential review. Clara's name was underlined in red ink. By the time the office lights dimmed and people packed up their bags in silence, no one had spoken a word about Brady's spotlight post or the canceled newsletter or the missing calendar invites. But nearly everyone had already heard the same thing whispered in kitchens, stairwells, and Slack. The temp was back, and this time, she had a letterhead with her name in gold foil, sealed in. The following Monday at 9:58 a.m., the executive conference room on the 26th floor of Hamilton, Rowe and Cole was already half full, the air tight with tension, and the scent of black coffee poured into ceramic mugs. The blinds were closed, lights dimmed low for screen visibility, and a projector buzzed softly as legal counsel reviewed slides from the preliminary damage control strategy. Mark sat rigid in his chair near the head of the table, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Clara had not made eye contact with anyone. Miranda flipped silently through a stapled packet of statements prepared over the weekend, lips pressed into a flat line. The firm's internal legal team was seated across from them, stone-faced. All phones were set to silent. No one had cracked a smile in hours. At precisely 10 a.m., the door opened. The room fell still. A woman entered, tall, poised, dressed in a tailored black suit with subtle pinstripes, her heels quiet but deliberate on the hardwood floor. She walked without hesitation to the front of the room and placed a slim, leather portfolio on the table. A black and gold name badge was clipped to the lapel of her jacket. It read, "Denise Howard Partner, Miles and Howard, LLP." No one moved. A few heads turned slowly toward Mark. He sat frozen, eyes fixed on the placard as if it might disappear if he stared long enough. Miranda's hand paused mid-flip through her documents. Denise looked directly at her, then at each person around the table. Her voice was clear, composed, and unmistakably calm. "Good morning. I appreciate you making time for this special session." She pulled a document from her folder, slid it forward onto the center of the table, and placed a single sheet on top of the stack. "This," she said evenly, "is a declaration of material interest executed under SEC compliance, acknowledging my direct equity stake in Hamilton, Rowe, and Cole through a capital investment facilitated by Horizon Brook Holdings, an institutional investor whose acquisition of 12.3% of your publicly available shares was finalized as of 9:02 a.m. this morning." She paused. "I am now the third largest shareholder in this company." Mark leaned forward slowly, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "You what?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Denise turned her eyes toward him but did not respond to the question. Instead, she continued, "I am here today in dual capacity, as lead counsel in the ongoing civil rights litigation against this firm, and as a representative of an investor group with fiduciary concerns related to management conduct, liability exposure, and cultural risk management." Miranda blinked. "You're representing a plaintiff against us and simultaneously appearing as a shareholder?" "Correct," Denise replied. "The roles are fully disclosed and legally distinct. My position as equity holder is advisory and non-executive. I will not vote on board decisions related to this litigation, but I do hold the right to appear in this room under shareholder access policies you yourselves ratified last year." Someone coughed quietly at the far end of the table. Clara's face had gone pale. Denise continued, "This meeting has been documented and time-stamped. A summary will be submitted to all shareholders of record within 72 hours under the conditions of the transparency amendment filed with your annual ethics policy. I am prepared to present a summary of findings related to systemic workplace discrimination, HR misconduct, and executive-level response to formal and informal employee concerns. She clicked a small remote. The screen behind her blinked, revealing a slide labeled Internal Risk Exposure Case, Howard v. HRC. Mark stood up abruptly. "You can't be serious. You were a temp." Denise looked at him directly. "I was a contracted consultant. My resume was submitted with full legal credentials." "You didn't read it." He opened his mouth again, but she raised a hand. "Let's not waste this time." She clicked to the next slide. It showed a heat map of internal email threads with tagged keywords: culture fit, too formal, background check, print room. Next to it was a bullet list of names associated with flagged language, dates of correspondence, and department origins. She pointed toward the list. "These are direct violations of both your own DI policy and state-level fair workplace statutes." She clicked again. A short video clip played of the office lounge. Brady receiving applause, Denise visible in the background, alone. Another clip showed a team meeting where a printed document, her original deck, was passed out with someone else's initials on it. The screen shifted again to a final slide titled Ownership Transparency. It showed the acquisition trail from Horizon Brook Holdings to Denise Howard's personal investment entity, dated, signed, and notarized. She paused for a moment, then said, "There are two matters before you. First, the legal proceedings, which will be handled in court. Second, the fiduciary concern from a shareholder perspective, which I am raising here today under Article 4, Section 3 of your corporate governance policy." Silence filled the room. Not a single chair shifted. Not a keyboard clicked. Denise placed the remote down gently. "You have a culture problem," she said flatly. "It's not a perception issue. It's documented. It's structural. And it will cost you, if not in court, then in valuation, in partnerships, in retention." She opened her leather folder again, pulled out a final packet, and laid it before Miranda. "These are options," she said. "Policy changes, training initiatives, board oversight reform. They're not demands." Yet, at that moment, the door opened again. A man entered with a briefcase and handed a sealed envelope to Mark. Mark opened it, skimmed the content, then sat down heavily in his chair. The top of the document read, "Shareholder Alert Demand for Special Review Panel." It had been signed by two other major equity holders. Denise remained standing. Outside the glass wall, the city moved as if in slow motion. Elevators hummed, email alerts pinged faintly, and down on the 25th floor, an intern was still adjusting the company's homepage to remove the diversity badge that had hung there for weeks. Inside the boardroom, Denise reached forward, picked up her name placard, and turned it gently to face the room. Denise turned the placard fully toward the group, its engraved lettering now facing the full length of the table, as if daring anyone to look away. No one did. Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack. It remained steady, calm, and clipped with the precision of someone who had rehearsed every word more times than anyone in that room had ever prepared for a deposition. "You've heard the numbers," she said, tapping the surface of the folder still in front of Miranda. "Now you'll hear the truth in the voices of your own team." With one click of her remote, the projector behind her shifted slides and began to play an audio recording, clean, high quality, and time-stamped. The voice was unmistakably Greg's, captured during a meeting 2 weeks prior, with several other team members present. On the screen, subtitles appeared in perfect sync. I mean, let's be real. There's no way a temp like her wrote that analysis. No shot. Maybe she copy-pasted it from something old. I'm just saying. Laughter followed in the background. Then someone chimed in. She barely talks to anyone. That's not team player energy. A second voice added, "Honestly, I thought she was someone's assistant." Around the table, shoulders tensed. Clara stared at the floor. Mark's jaw tightened, his pen tapping soundlessly on the notepad in front of him. Denise clicked to the next slide, a Slack thread screenshot between Clara and Greg. Clara wrote, "If we don't move her out before Q3, She's going to ask questions. Let's not give her that window. Greg replied, copy. I'll talk to Holly. She's not integrating. That'll work. The timestamps were clear. The usernames were visible. Denise gave them a second to read it before moving forward. She played a second recording, shorter than the first. In this one, during a department sync, Brady could be heard saying, "You guys ever actually see her outside that printer room? She's like the office ghost. Weird vibes. Total mismatch." The recording ended with another round of chuckles and someone muttering, "Don't worry, she won't be here long." The audio faded. Denise turned back to the room. These statements weren't made in private. They weren't whispered. They happened on company time, in company spaces, by salaried employees whose pay is partly funded by the same budget that labeled me as expendable. She advanced to a slide titled Disparity by Pattern. A chart appeared on screen, breaking down project credit attribution. Her name appeared as editor, formatter, or assistant across multiple major deliverables. Brady's name, in comparison, appeared as lead on 3 of the same projects, despite producing no original work. The dates aligned with each instance. She was told to submit her data through another team member. She let the chart sit on screen. Then came the next slide, a copy of her official complaint, now submitted in full, bearing the seal of the State Equal Opportunity Commission. "This," she said, "is the complaint, filed under state and federal jurisdiction, supported by digital evidence, audio records, and system access logs. The request for damages totals $85 million, calculated based on institutional failure to prevent, address, or correct discriminatory treatment, as well as negligence in HR protocol and quantifiable harm to reputation, well-being, and opportunity." She pulled out a printed copy of the filing and passed it to Miranda. The breakdown is as follows: $25 million in compensatory damages, $15 million for pain and suffering, $30 million in punitive damages, and $15 million for breach of implied ethical code and employer negligence. She paused. If mediation is not reached within 30 days, the suit proceeds to trial. Miranda took the file, but did not open it. Her hands remained still, fingers curled over the folder's edges like she was trying to hold something together. Mark shifted in his seat, the color draining from his face. "This is a lot," he said finally. Denise looked at him. "It's thorough. Because your behavior was consistent." She clicked once more. The final slide read Documentation Index. Beneath the title were hyperlinks to over 60 files. Time-stamped emails, side-by-side deck revisions, chat logs, door access entries, and IT audit reports, all labeled, sorted, and cross-referenced. She didn't narrate this slide. She let it speak for itself. After 30 seconds of silence, she reached into her folder and retrieved a second envelope, smaller than the first. "This is addressed to the board of directors," she said, laying it flat on the center of the table. "It includes a formal notification of breach of shareholder confidence. This company made public commitments to diversity, integrity, and equity. Those commitments were not upheld." At that moment, a low chime sounded from Mark's phone. He glanced at the screen, then handed it quietly to Miranda. She read the message, blinked once, and passed it down. One of the firm's largest external partners had just requested a meeting to discuss the firm's direction and leadership response to the ongoing discrimination case. A second notification arrived before the first was fully processed. Another client paused renewal of their annual contract. Denise stood still, her hands resting gently against the edge of the table. "If I had been loud," she said, "you would have called me angry. If I had cried, you would have called me unprofessional. I was quiet. You called me cold. I did my job. You called it luck. I disappeared, and you called that success." No one responded. The projector continued to hum behind her. One of the interns assigned to assist legal shuffled a document off the printer in the hallway. Outside, the city moved like nothing had changed. Inside the room, not a single eye met hers. Denise picked up the remote, turned off the projector, and began gathering the rest of her documents. The air was heavy. The silence was whole. She reached into her folder for one final file. As Denise reached into her folder for the final file, the air inside the executive boardroom held so much weight it felt tangible, pressing against the walls like a slow, rising tide. The document she placed on the table this time was slim, just 2 pages long, but it landed like a gavel. It was a certified notice of action from the Compliance Oversight Subcommittee of the company's own board of directors, signed that morning by the chair. It stated in unambiguous terms that effective immediately, CEO David Langford would be placed under formal investigation by an external ethics review panel and suspended from executive operations pending the outcome of said review. The decision had been made in an emergency session the night before, following a confidential alert from 2 high-level shareholders, both of whom had reviewed Denise's preliminary report in detail. The news spread through the room like a dropped match in a dry forest. Mark blinked slowly. He opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't. Miranda leaned back in her chair, eyes scanning the words on the page, lips pressed together so tightly her skin turned pale. Clara's head sank slightly, her eyes glassy, but her face unreadable. Denise said nothing further. She stepped back, picked up her materials, and calmly exited the boardroom through the same door she'd entered just over an hour before. The click of her heels faded down the hallway, echoing through a floor where not one person had dared interrupt her. At 12:14 p.m., less than 30 minutes after her departure, the company's internal Slack channel received a surprise update from Human Resources. Effective immediately, CEO David Langford will step away from day-to-day operations. Interim leadership will be announced shortly. We appreciate your continued focus during this time. The post had no comments. It was read by 98% of staff within 7 minutes. At 12:31 p.m., a second email arrived, this one from Miranda Graves. It was short. It was addressed to the board, CC'd to operations. The subject line was, "Formal resignation, Miranda Graves." In the body, she wrote, "After careful reflection and acknowledgement of recent events, I have decided to step down from my role as Director of Human Resources. I wish the firm strength in the days ahead." The email was sent with a read receipt. It was opened by the board in under 1 minute. By 2 p.m., 3 directors, Greg Hollins, Clara West, and Drew Simmons, were called into back-to-back closed meetings with the external HR investigation team. The meetings lasted less than 20 minutes each. All 3 were escorted out of the building by 3:15. Their internal access badges were deactivated before they reached the elevators. No public reason was issued, but the Slack message board for marketing leadership was quietly archived that evening. That night, as the city lights began to shimmer outside the 26th floor, the company's external site banner was replaced with a neutral placeholder image. The original slogan, "Shaping Tomorrow with Integrity," was removed. At 7:42 p.m., a journalist from the business desk of the Herald published a breaking story titled Hamilton. Rowe and Cole sued for $85 million in discrimination case led by former employee turned legal partner. The article laid out key evidence from a filing, included anonymous quotes from staff, and embedded a viral clip from the internal audio leak, specifically Greg's voice laughing over the phrase, "There's no way a temp like her wrote that." The article was shared over 12,000 times in under 2 hours. By 8:30 a.m. the next morning, the company's stock price had opened down 8.7%. By midday, it was down 12.1%. Analysts flagged the firm as under public pressure and under governance review. A known fund manager went live on cable business news stating, "What we're witnessing here is a cultural collapse in real time." At 10:05 a.m., the company received formal notices from 3 key clients, Harper & Finch Pharmaceuticals, Allied Renewables, and Morgan Pike Strategies, stating that their current partnership contracts would be placed under active review and all non-essential collaboration would be paused until further notice. Together, those 3 contracts represented nearly 22% of Hamilton, Rowe and Cole's projected Q4 revenue. At 11 a.m., the head of the communications team held an internal sync call. Half of the department had already seen the article, and a handful had seen the social media backlash firsthand. with screenshots of past diversity posts from the company being flooded with sarcastic comments and side-by-side comparisons showing Denise's desk in the print room juxtaposed with Brady's photo holding a certificate labeled Emerging Talent. By noon, the board had convened once again, this time without David Langford. His interim replacement was named Julia Chun, a former COO known for restructuring two mid-sized consultancies under fire for similar accusations. Her first act as interim CEO was to issue a statement to staff. We failed. Not just one employee, but the principles we claim to uphold. This moment demands honesty. Our next steps will be transparent, permanent, and uncomfortable. She followed that message with an all-staff calendar invite. The title read, Mandatory Listening, Town Hall Cultural Reckoning. The location was the main auditorium. The guest speaker, Denise Howard, attorney and shareholder. At the same time, Denise stood in a high-rise office across the city, watching the morning news scroll across a muted screen. The headline banner read, Temp turned Titan, how a silent exit became a corporate earthquake. She didn't smile. She reviewed the next folder in her briefcase. It was thinner than the rest, labeled Internal Reform Initiative Draft Phase. Her phone buzzed. A message popped up from her assistant. Board approved your presence. Full room. There waiting. Denise picked up her coat, smoothed the collar, and turned toward the glass doors of her building's top-floor conference suite. The skyline behind her reflected a city still pulsing forward, but inside her stride, there was no hurry. She reached the elevator. The elevator ascended in silence, its brushed steel walls reflecting the light from the overhead LEDs and catching the faint, focused expression on Denise's face as she stood with her arms calmly at her sides, her leather briefcase held steady in her right hand. The numbers above the door ticked upward, 21, 22, 23, until the bell chimed at 26, and the doors parted to reveal the glass-walled auditorium where over 100 employees, managers, and board members sat already gathered, every seat filled. The company's usual town hall space now rearranged for what the new interim CEO had called a moment of reckoning. Denise stepped through the threshold without hesitation, crossing the polished floor with quiet authority, her heels striking with measured rhythm, her black suit sharp and clean beneath the high ceiling lights. The room grew still as eyes turned to her, and she walked to the stage where a single podium had been placed beside a long executive table. Julia Chin stood nearby, gave her a respectful nod, and stepped aside. Denise set her briefcase on the table, opened it without a word, and pulled out a single manila folder, placing it face down beside the microphone. Then she looked up, scanning the room. I wasn't supposed to be standing here, she began, her voice steady and clear. Not according to your systems. Not according to your assumptions. Not according to your emails. But I am. Her words landed with precision, not performative, not angry, just exact. I came here as a contractor, with no title, no corner office, no direct reports. I was asked to keep quiet, deliver deliverables, and disappear when it was convenient. And for a while I did. I complied. I adapted. I accepted every misplaced name, every empty seat, every missed opportunity, because I thought it would keep the peace. But the silence didn't protect me. It only protected the system built to ignore people like me. She paused for a breath, let it settle into the crowd. That system broke the moment I started recording, and it shattered when I put those recordings in front of your investors. She turned to the executive table where the remaining directors sat still and upright, their eyes lowered, hands folded. She let her gaze rest on each of them for a second longer than was comfortable. Then she clicked the remote in her hand, and behind her, the screen illuminated with a simple white title, Internal Mentorship Initiative Draft Framework. She didn't explain it yet. Instead, she clicked again, and a short video clip began to play, an audio waveform undulating on screen as the voice of Greg played through the speakers once more, saying, "She's efficient, sure, but she doesn't blend," followed by laughter, then silence, and then Clara's voice saying, "Let's not give her time to settle in." The clip ended. No one moved. From the second row, a man stood up slowly, hands trembling slightly at his sides. He was one of the department heads, Jason, someone who had been at the firm for over a decade, known for his strategic acumen and sharp weekly performance reviews. His face was flushed. "I was in that room," he said aloud, his voice thick. I laughed. He swallowed. "I didn't say those words, but I didn't stop them either. And when those files came out, I didn't think they'd have me in them. But I heard my voice, not in the jokes, but in the silence that followed. I didn't realize how loud silence could be until I heard it played back to me." His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to say it anyway. I was wrong. I didn't see it. And now I can't unsee it." He sat down, shoulders shaking slightly, and for the first time that day, no one looked away. No one shifted uncomfortably. They just watched him breathe. Denise nodded once. She walked back to the table, lifted the manila folder, and held it in the air. "This," she said, "is not a policy. It's an offer." She placed it on the table in front of Julia Chun. "The Internal Mentorship Initiative begins next week. Voluntary, anonymous sign-up, designed to pair senior leadership with employees from historically underrepresented backgrounds, race, gender identity, disability, orientation, socioeconomic status. You won't lead it. You'll learn in it. You'll listen. You'll sit where you've never sat and hear what you've never had to hear." She turned to the staff. "For anyone who believes in accountability that leads to growth, not just guilt, your names can go on the list today. No one will force you. But the silence, that won't be free anymore. It costs people too much." She reached back into her case and pulled out a small white notepad. "This is the first sign-up form. Paper. No digital trail. No optics. Just names." She laid it next to the folder. "The first session starts Wednesday at noon. Conference room 3A. If you show up, you sit. If you don't, that's your choice. But at least now, no one can say there wasn't a way forward." She stepped away from the podium and returned to the floor, standing at eye level with everyone in the room. Julia Chun stood and placed a hand on the mentorship folder, her eyes scanning the list on the cover page. Slowly, she nodded and addressed the room. "If you feel uncomfortable," she said, "that's the start of growth, not the end of it." You heard her. It begins Wednesday. Jason was the first to walk forward. He picked up the notepad, flipped to the first page, and wrote his name. Behind him came another, then 4, then 10. Denise watched, saying nothing, as one by one they lined up, not hurried, not performative, but real, quiet, deliberate. When the last one signed, she closed her briefcase, turned to Julia, and said, "Thank you for the time." Julia nodded. "Thank you for the lesson." Denise turned back toward the exit, walking again toward the elevator. The same elevator she had once taken to the print room. The same one where no one had spoken her name correctly. The same one she had left through 3 weeks prior without a goodbye. The doors opened. She stepped inside. And as they slid shut behind her, the reflection on the polished wall no longer showed a contractor, or a temp, or a stranger to be tolerated. It showed someone they all knew now, by name. If this story kept you watching, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful narratives just like this one. Which part of Denise's journey hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're reading every one.